So welcome to the next episode of Important Questions in K-12 STEM Education with me, Todd Hutner. And that is a picture of me my first year teaching science. I was in Florida, and I think I still have my passion for science education that I had almost 20 years ago now. I'm happy to be here with everyone today. Today's topic or question is what makes an effective PL experience for STEM teachers? And I think generally throughout the summer, teachers are engaged in a number of professional learning experiences. You have some that are as short as half a day and some that might be an entire week. And the theory of action behind professional learning, so why do we want teachers to go through these experiences, is because we think that when teachers have knowledge, beliefs, skills, and goals, that's going to impact their instructional practice. And instructional practice includes includes all three, I should say, of planning, teaching, and assessing. And then we think that what a teacher does when they plan, teach, and assess will impact student learning. So if we want to improve student learning, we can do so by changing teachers' knowledge, beliefs, skills, and goals. According to a 2022 EdWeek article, over $18 billion is spent each year in the United States on professional learning, yet most of this have little to no impact on a teacher's instructional practice. So a teacher goes to a workshop and then they may or may not even be excited about it, but regardless, when they come back to the classroom, things don't really change. And I think this matters because not only are districts not getting much return on the investment of time and money, but it matters for student outcomes. So when we think about professional development over the summer and over the school year, I think it's important that we keep in mind what makes professional development or professional learning effective for STEM teachers. And I think there are some key features of effective STEM professional learning. Some of these I think can be applied to other subjects, including the first one that I'm going to share. But then there are some that I think are really STEM specific. And so let's get into those. The first feature I should say, learning is a process, not an event. Often we treat teacher professional learning as an event. So you're going to go to a workshop on using formative assessment, and then you're going to know how to use formative assessment, and then you're going to do formative assessment. And because we often think of PL as a process, as an event, we get a calendar like this. There's a lot going on here, but the days that are highlighted in blue-ish are professional learning days from a school district. And you see that really throughout the school year, there's really 2 to 3 PL days a semester, depending on whether you're teaching elementary or secondary, and how much of that is district-wide or campus-wide or at teachers' discretion, but there's not a lot of really sustained district-wide necessarily professional development. Now, to be fair, this is better than when I started teaching 20 years ago. When I started teaching, we had summer training, and that was pretty much it. But I think it's important to ask this question: how would our approach to PL change if instead of sort of starting out with teachers saying you're going to learn this new way of teaching and assessing, we said we, the district or an instructional coach or a principal, we are investing in your sustained and continued growth as an educator. I think this is really important because one professional learning experience should add to a teacher's repertoire. And we should work with them over an extended period of time in order to help them bring that new learning into a regular part of their teaching or instructional practice. The second feature is making time at the end of each session where they learn something new to commit to try out a new approach and improve over time. So I can't advocate enough for this thinking about how can we try this out, and then recognizing that they're not going to be experts and do it perfectly the first time. And so I like to end all of my professional learning experiences by having teachers commit to try what we learned in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we learned about formative assessment. They can try out this new approach to formative assessment over the course of the next few weeks. I want them to identify what resources they'll need to implement. So do they need lab equipment? And this is where it's really important for science and math teachers. Do they need access to the internet? Do they need calculators? How will they obtain the resources? So do we already have those in the supply closet, or do I have to buy something new? Identify any potential barriers to implementation. So this is a great way to teach, but my principal wants a I do, we do, you do format for all math. And then identify approaches to overcome those barriers. So how can we work with that school principal to overcome their desire for I do, we do, you do teaching? I think part of the improvement over time also can focus on things like getting peer feedback on lesson plans and assessments, peer observations, observing videos of one's own teaching. So at the pre-service undergraduate level, we ask them to do that all the time. And then when you become a full-time teacher, we rarely ask you to analyze your own teacher, and then also analyzing student work. So what did I do? And this is an example of student work on a engineering design challenge to keep vaccines cold. And the goal here is to integrate engineering and science. So what topics, how does student work show whether my efforts in integrating engineering led to the learning outcomes for science that I want? A third feature is a focus on and a commitment to equity. So we want to think about how equity is going to impact how we utilize this training, I should say. How can we make what I'm learning accessible to all students? How can we use this to account for and invite students into STEM learning? I think this is really important in my experience as a PL provider. I've had instances where teachers explicitly state, this would be great for my advanced kids, but my low kids can't handle this. My low kids need just basic skills. And that's not really inviting. Moreover, when we don't attend to equity and we allow those sorts of thoughts to permeate in the room, in the group, all we're doing is reinforcing structural barriers to STEM learning for students of color, for girls, for students from low-income families, and students with additional learning need. These are groups that have traditionally been discouraged from and prevented from accessing science, math, engineering, computer science, technology learning experiences. So that focus on equity is really important. And as PL leaders, one of the things we need to do is really set time for how is this going to impact our teaching with students that are not, or that have historically been denied access to robust STEM learning experiences. The fourth feature, content-specific learning experiences. Good teaching in math is different than good teaching in science, and both are different from good teaching in ELAR and social studies. Things that a good math teacher, a good science teacher do are going to be different, and yet there's a host of professional development providers, including this one that I'm showing on screen, and I've redacted the identifying information, that it's very domain general. So we're gonna, really the only thing that they talk about is aligning to state and district standards. But how is that different in math and in science? Even something as basic as how they value the idea of proof in math and science is very different. And so we're teaching different subjects that have different, which I'll get into, different disciplinary practices. And so it's important that we recognize that teachers need that content-specific, subject-specific professional learning experiences. The fifth thing, teachers need to engage in disciplinary practices. So here are the mathematical practices in the Common Core State Standards for Math and the science and engineering practices in the Next Generation Science Standards. And as part of the professional learning experience, we want teachers to engage in these practices. I think this is important because it's possible we're working with teachers who have not engaged in one or more of these practices. I think that's a really, for me, eye-opening idea, that we can't just put the list up there and expect all of our teachers to know this. For example, the idea of computational thinking in science education has really only been around maybe a decade or so in terms of the popularity, a little over a decade. And so most teachers probably have not engaged in computational thinking as a student, or maybe even as a teacher or an adult or a professional. And so I think it's really important we give our teachers opportunities to engage in the practices that we want them to support student engagement in. And then a sixth feature of good STEM-focused professional development, and I think this is really important, is curriculum, equipment, and software that work together to support student learning. And I think there's two aspects of this that we can look at. So feature 6A is provide high-quality instructional materials designed with the new equipment or software use in mind. So when I was teaching physics, my principal had some budget left over, and he bought a whole bunch of cool stuff. And I was like, this is great. These sensors are awesome. But there was nothing to support my use of the sensor. This is the user manual for a motion detector, and it doesn't really give me any guidance on teaching with the motion sensor. And if I go to the website in order to get labs for use with that motion sensor, to get instructional materials, I have to buy an additional book. And if we're going to give teachers access to new technology, we also need to give them access to instructional materials to support the use of that technology. Because when we don't, we get the science supply closet. And those of you who have taught science know that when you go into the supply closet, one of the fun things to do is find the oldest thing that's still in that room. And sometimes you find things as old as the 1960s or 1950s, because we get this stuff, we never really use it, we just put it on a shelf and then keep adding stuff. The flip side of this is provide the necessary equipment and materials to fully implement new instructional approaches. Another time I went to a training that was mandatory for all science teachers in the district, for all physics teachers, I should say, and we were trained on some really cool new ways of teaching and an exciting new set of instructional materials. And when I asked the science coordinator, when are we going to get the technology needed, that the providers brought with them, they had like cases of laptops. The science coordinator said, well, that's up to your principal. And I found that incredibly frustrating. Why was I in the room if my principal was ultimately the one who was going to tell me, no, we don't have the budget? And here's another example in math. So we have 3 ways to sort of do calculations. And one of the big pushes in society now is this idea of data science and analyzing data. And so I could run a linear regression using any of these 3 tools. I could do it using a basic like TI-30X calculator, but that's a lot of effort. I could also do it with the TI-84 Plus, or I could use an online calculator like Desmos. And Desmos, the nice thing there is I can spend a lot less time entering my data and a lot more time focused on what that data looks like as a student and as a teacher. I think this is really important because if we don't give teachers the necessary tools to teach with a new approach, they're not going to do it. So in summary, I think these are 6 features. These webinars are supposed to last no more than 20 minutes. So I think there are potential other features for good PL in STEM. And for each of these 6, I could have spent an hour on what each one looks like. So with that, I know there might be some questions. We have one question, which is, how long does the support for teachers need to continue? I think that's a good question. So if we're saying that learning is a process, not of an event, how long does that process have to last for? And I don't know if there's a specific, it has to last for 3 weeks. I think it depends on the nature of what you're asking teachers to learn. But I would also argue that if we think about teaching in regards to the continuous growth of our educators, or professional learning as the continuous growth of our educators, then there is no end. And one thing we probably want to do is set up some structures to help teachers engage in that continuous learning process instead of even a sort of semester period of we're going to learn something. So I hope that answers the question. End with, remember, teachers need time to learn, try, and refine new instructional practices they learn about during a PL. I think this is, again, a central theme of what I do, that teachers are not going to go to one-day workshop and then magically be an expert on a new teaching approach, a new assessment approach. So we want to give them time to learn, try, refine, improve at those things. Topics for the next 2 weeks. Next week is science literacy, still a goal of science education. And then the following week, what do we mean by the joy and wonder of mathematics? If you are interested in other professional learning opportunities, you can check out our website, the programs and events, and the professional learning pages. And then if you would like, you can share or follow us on social media at Argument Driven. That's our Twitter/X, Instagram, Facebook. If you have further questions for me regarding the content of this webinar or any of the previous webinars in the series, please email me at todd@argumentdriveninquiry.com. And if you want, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Todd Hutner. That's also my Twitter if you want to follow me there. So thank you all very much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon.